Today is all about miniature portraits. This is an exercise that I really love to do in preparation for a larger, more ambitious portrait, and it lets me assess what I'm looking at. It lets me acknowledge the colors that I'm seeing, the shape, the composition, the mood, everything about the portrait. It just gives me a little practice run without draining all of the energy that I have for that novel experience of a new painting. I'm going to be using a pencil for the lines in this case, but feel free to use a small paintbrush or a pastel or a pen, anything that gives you a nice line. And then after that, we'll be moving in with some color. So to begin with, I'm going to just assess the composition. And what I really like to do with these miniature portraits is, as we're going so small, we might as well get the whole picture. So it will be a full body portrait, and we're going to aim to get the sofa in as well. So I'm lucky to be working with a live model today. I've got Adrian here with me, and I'm going to just take a look at Adrian and figure out where the best place to start is going to be. So I'm going to start here with Adrian's elbow, which is just holding him onto the sofa. It's a really nice contact point, and it will kind of show the weight of him in that sofa. It really is what you would normally do, but just on such a smaller scale. And that for sure poses some challenges. It does take a little while for your brain to kind of get around it, but it also just dissolves so many other issues that you run into when you're working on a bigger scale. Like the pressure is just off for all of the details that you encounter. Suddenly on this scale, you just realize that so many of them don't actually feel necessary in capturing who you're looking at. What can be helpful is to find the first mark that you put down and then find the furthest point from that mark. So I think that will be Adrian's foot. And I'll just make sure quickly that that is going to be in the composition. And I might just put a little mark there just to remind myself that that's where it's going to be. The really liberating thing about working on this size is, yeah, like how much detail it kind of removes from the situation. What that does also mean, though, is all the marks that you do put down are very heavy with information. They communicate a lot and they stand in for a lot. And so you can do this exercise really fast, but you can also take your time and really think about the marks that you're putting down. Right now, I'm just drawing in the whole of Adrian in the composition, and I'm just on the shirt. I'm just getting in these little creases. Something that's really great on this scale is when you do add in a little crease or a little detail like the eyebrow or the button, it almost, that's all you need for that area. So now I've finished painting or drawing in the kind of whole figure. I've got all of Adrian in there now, or as much of him as I feel is necessary at this stage. And now I'm just gonna kind of quickly bring in the sofa. Something that is really nice about including the sofa in a small piece like this is that it just creates a sense of the place so quickly. And you'll see what I mean, especially when we move in with the color. you just very quickly get a sense of who this is and where they are just through the weight of them in all the creases of the sofa with all the clothes around them. For this little portrait, I'm using an A5 piece of Okawara paper. It's a handmade Japanese paper, originally made for printmaking. However, this makes it perfect to use for oil painting and also just drawing in general because it has a really beautiful textured side to it. That's the reason I love to use this paper, and I use it for most of my work. I'm going to move in with some color now. Because I've kind of got everything I feel I need to just with this pencil. So when it comes to applying color for this exercise, what I really like to do is to just give myself a massive break when it comes to this. And I'm not going to be focusing on the small in-between colors. I'm just going to try and find the average shade for each part of the painting. So, for example, if I start with the trousers, instead of finding all these little pieces of color and shadows and light, I'm just gonna mix a kind of soft ochre and then this bit is really fun. I'll just go straight in and color in that entire area. I often work on a really large scale, and so when it comes to bringing in the color, there is so much to think about. It's so careful. And that's why I love making these little pieces so much, because they just offer the opposite. And the only thinking I have to do is choosing the color or mixing the color. It's so fun to be able to work in that way from time to time. While I've got this color on my brush, I've just noticed that actually Adrian's hair has a few strands in it that kind of, you could basically say are the same color, or for the case of this miniature reduced portrait, you could get away with that being the same color. And so I'm just gonna add in a few careful pieces, but not too careful. And already that's starting to feel like Adrian's hair. And now I'm just gonna mix up a really nice pale pink, pastel pink for Adrian's shirt. I'm about to paint Adrian's bright turquoise socks, and I'm just noticing all these little marks in the top of them in the stitching that if I were doing a large-scale portrait, I would definitely want to include. And even though I'm not putting that down here, it's something that I've been able to process and sort of register as important information for me. This way of working is really suited to my temperament because it's such an immediate way of putting down marks and seeing results. It is such an exciting thing to do every time. I'll do a handful of these miniature portraits at least once a month, and I'll do them as their own thing, or I'll do them in preparation for a bigger portrait. And every time it just really invigorates me and makes me remember all the things that I love about painting. And as this is such a fast way of working, you can do this on the go. You don't have to be at home or based in your studio to make this kind of work. You can get out your sketch pad on the tube or on the bus or at a cafe with your friend having coffee, and you can just do a really quick 5-minute portrait. You just need a pencil and maybe some colored pencils. So I'm just mixing up a kind of nice bright white for the sofa. I'll take quite a bit of titanium white, and I would just add in a little touch of ultramarine blue. You can make the paint really thin and runny, or you can make it very heavy and textural. They're both nice to work with, and I usually end up using a mixture of the two. All right, so this next bit is just the last item in the composition before I move on to the skin tones, and it's just this yellow blanket underneath Adrian's elbow. And I've just made this nice kind of butter color yellow. And the same as everything else, I'm just going to color that in very quickly. I think working with colors in this way is really useful and really wonderful in terms of getting an idea of what colors sing together and what works together in a way that you enjoy personally. When I'm usually working on a larger portrait, I will try and be very truthful to the colors that I'm seeing. And this exercise, as I'm just focusing on the average of the colors, so it's not quite the color that you're seeing, but it is at the same time. But it's not as precise as it usually would be for me. While I've got this yellow on my brush, I actually just had a little glimpse of maybe being able to put a little bit of that yellow in the hair, just like one little streak on the side here. It's not totally accurate, but for the sake of this small portrait, it does work. And that tiny streak of hair leads us perfectly into approaching the skin tones. And so for this, I'm going to be working in some smaller pieces of color. But if you want, you can take the same approach as we've done for the clothing, and you can just try and find your average tone and just go in with that. But like I said, I'm going to go in with a bit more detail. Not loads, but just enough. I'm going to start with the hands because that feels like quite a significant 2 patches of color, this kind of dark ochreish, almost purple. Again, because I've got that color on my brush, I've actually just realized that that can just stand in for this strand of hair. And maybe the top of the head. Working this way, I'm, just making fairly reckless decisions pretty quickly. But because of the scale and the speed at which you can work, it really allows you to do that. And often I find what that gives me is it it almost shows me that my subconscious or the instinct in me, it kind of actually knows what it's doing. And that's a really nice thing to be reminded of when you're working, I guess, intuitively. I'm gonna paint this little pink ear. Okay, because I can't resist, I'm gonna add in a few of these dots with the same pink where the knuckles are, because it pretty much is that color. A tiny bit on the neck. Something that's interesting about this way of working is that if you make a mistake or what you feel is a mistake, you can just very quickly go and grab another bit of paper and really fast just do the same piece again and sort of correct that area that you didn't like. However, you can hold on to these and you can look back through them, because something that I often find on my much bigger works is something that I thought was a mistake or didn't sit right with me. Like months later, when I look at a photo of it, I kind of see all the stuff that I wasn't picking up on that was actually significant and special and contributed towards that portrait in quite a big way, but I couldn't see it at the time. And so it went in the bin or something. And these little pieces, they catch those mistakes. But you don't have to destroy the piece. You can just pop it in your sketchbook or look at a photo of it later. The last bit of detail that I really can't resist putting in is just this very pale purplish beige, which I've just mixed up here. And it's just around the left eye and a little line on the side of the face. Maybe just a tiny bit on one of the fingers. So I'm gonna leave this portrait where it is now, because I feel like there's enough information there to communicate a little portrait of Adrian. And hopefully working in this way has shown you that you can make a portrait of something very complicated and reduce it down into something much simpler, but still full of information and life. I hope you've been inspired, and why don't you have a go at making your own mini portraits and feeling the same liberation that I do when I make them.
If you'd like to find out more about these masterclasses, go onto our website, skyartsartistoftheyear.tv.